So we're going to talk about natural minor borrowed chords. And what that means is that we can borrow chords from our natural minor scale to be able to create some really interesting reharmonizations. So let's dive into this. All right, so first of all, what we have to first make sure that we know is our major scale and then our major scale diatonic chords. So let me load up that sheet music. Okay, so when we're taking a look at the major scale, here's a G major scale, all right? So we can see that we have one sharp in a major scale. I know it says flat, but it's really an F sharp right there. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, right? Okay, now that's our regular major scale. If we number the notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it'd be 1 again. And if we create diatonic chords on that scale, which all that means is that we're going to create a chord on each note of the scale utilizing only notes from that scale. Okay, so notice that the only black note in here is that F sharp, all right? And that pattern is the same in all 12 keys. That's what's really cool about it. And the pattern is this: 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 dominant seventh, 6 minor, 7 minor, 7 flat, 5, and then back to 1 major. Some people call this half diminished. I call it minor 7 flat 5. All right, so that's our major scale and our major diatonic chords. So the next thing we got to do is then figure out natural minor scale and then our natural minor diatonic chords. All right, so the first thing is, how do you create natural minor? Well, natural minor is a mode of the major scale, and that's just a fancy way of saying that we are starting the scale on a different note other than the root. All right, so when you hear the term mode, it just means that we're starting the scale on a different note other than the root. It's not, it's an okay definition. It's not completely accurate because we could have from root to root, we do call that our Ionian mode. But typically what it means is that we're going to be taking the scale and we're just shifting the scale, right? So if I was in the key of C, that's one scale, that's what we call Ionian. If I shift it up, right, that's Dorian. If I shift it up, that's Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and then back to Ionian. That Aeolian mode from the 6th scale degree to the 6th scale degree, that is what we call our natural minor. So in the key of G major, to find the minor scale or to find the natural minor for G major, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, E. We start on E and we make a G major scale starting on E. So E minor is the relative minor of G major. G major is the relative major of E minor. So basically E minor and G major are kind of hand in hand, right? They go hand in hand together. They share the same key signature. They have the same notes. However, when we write out that natural minor scale, you see we get the natural minor scale here. We got the F sharp in there, right? But now you'll notice that the diatonic chords are a little bit different, right? So it's now 1 minor, 2 minor 7 flat 5, flat 3 major, 4 minor, 5 minor, flat 6 major 7th, and then flat 7 dominant 7th. Now, if you're paying attention to this, you'll realize that, hey, wait a second. So that is the same thing as these diatonic, the G major diatonic chords. They're just shifted, right? Notice how if I'm starting here in E minor, it's minor, minor 7 flat 5, then right, then major, minor, minor, this major 7th, and then dominant 7th. Well, that's the same thing. It's just starting right here, okay? So it's starting here on 1, right? So E minor is the 1 minor, then F sharp minor is 2 minor 7 flat 5. But this F sharp minor 7 flat 5 is the same thing as the 7 chord in the key of G. So that means that if I were to play around with these chords, right, but I start on G here, so I'm going 1, 6, 2, 5. It sounds like I'm in G major, right? But if I shift this around and I go like E minor, E, you start to get that sound of E minor more because I'm starting on the E minor and I'm kind of playing around and keeping those chords those around that E minor sound, right? So I don't keep coming back to G. The ear hears it as E minor. All right, so that's our natural minor scale in diatonic chords. Now let's talk about parallel minor, because this is where it really starts to get fun. So when we have G major, right, our G major scale, we could play our G major scale. We can then move into what we call a parallel minor by flatting the third, the sixth, and seventh scale degrees of that major scale. Now, if we flat the third, we get B flat. If we flat the sixth, we get E flat. And if we flat the seventh, we get F natural. Okay? This creates our G natural minor scale. And you'll notice, too, that it's the same key signature as B flat major, right? Because remember, G minor is the relative minor of B flat major. If you ever have to know what the relative major is for a minor key, just go up to the minor third, right? So if I'm in G minor, I go up to the minor third. Oh, B flat is the relative major. And you could do the same thing in reverse. If you needed to know what your relative minor is, you can go down a minor third from B flat and you know it's G. Or you can go up to the sixth scale degree as well and you know it's that also. Okay, so G major and then G parallel minor. Okay, this is where it gets tricky for students, right? Because remember, this is G major, natural minor in G, right? So G's relative minor is E minor, right? Because it shares the same key signature. But G parallel minor means that we're taking the major scale and now we're making it a natural minor scale, right? Which really means that we are now moving the key signature to a B flat key signature, right? Because we have the B flat and the E flat in there. Okay. All right. So to move a major scale to a minor scale, all you do is flat the third, the sixth, and the seventh scale degrees. It might be easier to see it on C. So there's C major. To make it C natural minor, I flat the third, I flat the sixth, and I flat the seventh. And that gives me C natural minor, which is also the same thing as what relative major? Go down a root, go to the minor third, E flat is my relative major to C minor. All right, so back to G natural minor. So then if I go ahead and I create my diatonic chords on G natural minor, I get what? G minor 7, A minor 7 flat 5, B flat major 7, that's a flat 3 major 7, C minor, D minor, flat 6 major is E flat major, and then flat 7 dominant 7, that's F7. All right, so now that we're armed with those new diatonic chords from natural minor, now let's go back and let's start to figure out these borrowed chords. All right, so now if I load up my We Three Kings example, all right, this is just a real basic example from when the song moves into major. So okay, so real basic, right? We've heard that before. Okay, fine. Let's first of all harmonize this utilizing just our diatonic chords. So remember, our diatonic chords in major, whoops, sorry about that. Let me go back to this. Our diatonic chords in major are what? G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D7, E minor, and F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Okay. Now, when I'm going to harmonize a melody utilizing my diatonic chords, I can think about progressions that are common progressions, but I can also just kind of think like, all right, well, I got to make sure that the melody note fits with the chord, right? So if I were to do something like, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, probably not going to sound all that good with G in the melody, right? So I'm obviously going to start with G right here, but this measure right here is obviously ripe for adding a chord in here because I got no chord written in there. So what can I put in there? Well, I could play around with a lot of different chords. I could go to the C first, but why would I do that if I'm already going to C right there? So instead, I already said the F sharp minor isn't going to work. What about E minor? Ooh, that sounds real nice. All right, so let's do that. Let's do E minor in here. Okay. And then I'll just put in some simple chords over here in the left hand. Okay. And we'll do the same thing here. All right. So we'll just add in these chords. Bam. All right. So now we have G, E minor, and then we go to C, and that's fine. We can keep the C if we want to, and then go back to G. There is actually another chord, another series of chords that we could put in here. I talked about this in my practical music theory and reharmonization course of how you can utilize your dominant motion here. So we could make this a D7 chord because D7 leads nicely to G, and we could replace that C with an A minor 7 chord. If you don't understand this, like I said, I go through this in my practical music theory and reharmonization class at Jazz Edge Academy. All right, so, and we'll just do something simple here. Okay. And I'll add in the 7th underneath there for the D. Okay, so now we have this G, E minor, A minor, D7, then back to G. This gives us this analysis. So this is 1 major, 6 minor, 2 minor, 5 7, going back to 1 major. Okay, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. That sounds really good. But now let's make this a little bit more slick with some of these borrowed chords. First of all, what does the term borrowed chord mean? Well, again, we're in G major here, right? So if we're in G major, we're thinking, oh, okay, I'll use my G major diatonic chords because I am in the key of G major. However, if I want to move and I want to use some chords from another key, I don't want to move into that key, right? So I don't want to move into minor. I'm in G major right here. So what I will do is I will borrow some of those chords temporarily, right? So I'm not moving into G minor. I'm not modulating into a minor key, right? I'm not changing the key center. All I'm doing is I'm borrowing some of those chords from other modes temporarily just to give it a little bit of an interesting sound to the ears. Okay. All right. So now what does that look like? Well, here, this is what I talked about in the We Three Kings lesson. I'll just tell you what it is that we did. Right. So again, when borrowing chords, I got to make sure that they work along with the melody, at least for the most part. Right. So what I did was I wanted to borrow chords from natural minor. So I went to my natural minor scale. Okay. And I said, okay, well, here are my chords. Okay. G minor, A minor, B flat, C minor, D minor, E flat, and F, 7. All right, now obviously I'm not going to use G minor because it's going to give it a G minor sound. Right? I don't want to do that. I don't want to change it into minor. It's in major. So I'm going to keep that first G major chord. But when I come over here to this next measure, well, what can I use? What's going to sound good? Okay. So I could go to that A minor, right? Because that's part of the natural minor, but it's an A minor 7 flat 5, right? That's not going to sound good, right? No good there. I could go to the B flat, right? But that sounds a little bit odd right there, right? So what I did was I went down to E flat major. I'm going to give you a trick here. A lot of times those borrowed chords from natural minor, there are really kind of a few that we really borrow a lot of. The first one is the flat 6 major. The other one is the flat 3 major. We will borrow those a lot in jazz. We also borrow that flat 7/7 chord. Okay, you see that in jazz a lot as well. So in G minor, once again, those chords would be G minor, A minor 7 flat 5, B flat major, C minor, D minor, E flat major, and F7. We don't really borrow 5 minor a lot. We don't go to 5 minor a lot. In fact, a lot of times we'll make that 5 a dominant chord because it's a stronger resolution back to the 1 chord. All right, so we don't utilize 5 minor a lot. Minor 7 flat 5, 2 minor 7 flat 5. Sure, we do that. We borrow that when we're doing a minor 2 5. Right? But that flat 3 major, flat 6 major works really well, and we're going to utilize those chords right here. So we're gonna stick with this G right here. Let me go ahead and add this in. Okay. So when we go to this chord here, check this out when I go down to flat 6 major. And then flat 3. And I can actually add in one extra chord in here. I could do the B flat, which is the flat 3, but then I can also go back to my C chord here. And it creates a very powerful progression. And this is all major 7. So check this out. Start to add in some tensions in your chord voicings, like some of these 9s in there. Really sounds nice. So let's do that. Let me write that out. So we have, see how I crushed the 9th in there? There's a nice big E flat major 7th chord in there. In the left hand, we'll add in that here, B flat major. This is kind of like the 6th, but it still works on that B flat major 7th chord quite nicely. So let's add that in. And then all right, so now let's take a look and listen to what we got here. And you could play around with this. You can make these like dotted quarter notes. Oops, sorry. There you go. Real nice, rich, powerful sound. And again, those are borrowed chords, right? So this would be considered flat 6, right? Let me see if I can get this. That's flat 6. And whoops. Don't want to play that. That's flat 6. And then this is flat 3. But these two chords right here are borrowed from natural minor. Now, are these the only chords that you could borrow? No, of course not. You could do other stuff if you wanted to. You could play around with other chords to see what you might enjoy the sound of, right? But these work especially well. Okay, so when you're thinking about borrowed chords, what I suggest that you do is start by just trying to take one chord, maybe 2. So if you're thinking about natural minor and you're thinking about, hey, I want to borrow some of these chords from natural minor, well, what can I, like, how should I start to borrow these chords from natural minor? Which chords should I choose? Just start with the flat 6 major and the flat 3 major. Start with those two chords right there. But remember, what you need to do is you need to go to the parallel minor, right? So if you're in the key of, say, C, You don't then go to A natural minor, you figure out C natural minor. And to figure out, to get that C natural minor, again, you flat the third, the sixth, and the seventh, and then you borrow those chords. So if I'm in the key of C here, and I'm like playing around 1, 6, 4, 5, and I want to borrow some chords, well, then I go to A flat major, that's flat 6 major. E flat major is flat 3 major. Then maybe back to my 5 sus. Okay. So you can hear how I can get some real neat sounds, and it allows me to move outside of the major scale diatonic chord system. That gives me more chords to choose for my harmonizations and reharmonizations. All right, that's it for borrowed chords. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks. All right, so now if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask them now. I'm live now. Now's the time to ask questions. If I don't get a question, then we're going to end the session. So anybody? I see that there are a number of you on. So if you have a question, go ahead and write in your question right now. Let me just go through and say, when we're thinking about these borrowed chords, some other kind of cool chords, there's also like that backdoor 2-5, right? So backdoor 2-5, like if I'm in C major, I can go F minor, B flat 7, then back up to C major. And that's kind of a cool borrow system right there as well. So that's what we call a backdoor 2-5. And so the backdoor 2-5 is another neat borrow, again, from natural minor. Because remember, 4 minor, flat 7, 7, back up to 1 major. I can also do that flat 3 major, flat 6 major, like we were doing that as well. And I can create combinations of these. All right, so anyway, that's it. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.